to be here as always, especially when I've got my famous honored guest, Karl Dakin and Kon. And I'm always a little bit hesitant of sharing your last name. I'll get it right eventually. But with that said, wonderful gentlemen and quality, high integrity business individuals who really are, a foundation for what we're talking about today is strategy. And I think that's always our challenge is when we've learned a lot, experienced a lot, what do we choose to do? Why do we choose to do it? And how do we attempt to have it accomplished? And that's where strategy really fits in. Comments and chat are wide open. We depend on that to make us as relevant and create as many value-added takeaways as possible today. With that, I'll turn it over to Karl, and Karl could share a little bit of an update and a little bit of an insight into original thoughts of strategy. Karl.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate being on the show today. And I forgot to mention, I got these new spectacles on Friday, which were designed specifically so I could read the fine print in the chat to the side here. Because I kept, every time we were on there, I'm like, I can't quite read what's in the chat room with my other glasses. So these are custom made just to help you out, Don, with your show, just to let you know. So this is back to strategy. If I had a show by myself, which I do on Tuesdays, and Kon's going to be my guest tomorrow, that's a good thing. But that's my crowd and Kon's crowd coming together, and that's two crowds converging. But we're on Don's show this morning, and Don has the largest show of the three of us, and so the three of us being together results in us working together towards a common goal of sharing the information that we're talking about today. And strategy is part of this. I've been working with Don since August of last year, trying to figure out how to present myself so more people see me, know that I exist, and also to help people understand who I am, what I do, and what I care about. And over the course of time, I've now published my newsletter, Instant Funding, for 6 months. And at the same time, I started my own LinkedIn Live show. And this is all part of a strategy to put myself out there where people can see me and hopefully help me earn, a acknowledgement or recognition of what I'm doing and how I'm going about doing it. And the point that I shared with Don before the show is that too often entrepreneurs try to do everything themselves. And that's one strategy, but it means that they're limited to their own resources, where if they align themselves with other people, if they strategically think about who else is going the same direction, trying to accomplish the same or similar goals, then all these resources can come together and they can move better, quicker, faster with a higher probability of success. So thinking, looking, trying to find people who have these common goals, trying to figure out how you can work with them so you can all be mutually successful. This all contributes to achieving your own objective, but doing it with a lot less stress and a lot less pain and suffering.
Yeah, I think that's a great start to a quality show. Let me turn it over to Kon while we're fresh and kind of get his insights into strategy and what's going on.
Well, first of all, good morning, gentlemen. Happy Monday. We are now, the first week of June. We are officially kind of into the summer period right now. So as we brush up all of our strategies for the next few months and kind of take this approach, I think it's it's a perfect timing for this discussion for us to have. It's good to be with you again today. Don, pleasure as always to join you, especially on Mondays to start off our week on a strong note. Karl, my brother, thank you for joining us today, and it's a pleasure to see you tomorrow as well on your show. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, word of the day, strategy. Strategy. When you think of strategy, I mean, for most of us, what does it mean? We throw that word around, especially as business owners, entrepreneurs, as professionals, we throw around that word strategy a lot. But in many ways, it's important for us to kind of look at it and say, okay, what the hell does that mean? You know, it's an easy buzzword to throw out there. Well, for most of us, it's really being very purposeful about an objective that we want. We know where we want to end up, and our strategy is how are we going to get there in the broad strokes? How are we supposed to approach this? What are the things that we deem are important along the way for us to focus on that will move us in that direction? It's like that old saying, the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And we have to carve those pieces out about how we're going about eating that elephant. And so for most of us, it's a big challenge to get to where we want to get to. Without strategy, though, you're going to be running around like a chicken with your head cut off. Today, in today's business environment, between what we have happening in person and so much of what's happening here on LinkedIn and in other platforms that we choose to operate on, you could go down rabbit holes endlessly. You can get distracted by the next shiny thing and by saying yes to this person or that person and totally derail what you're trying to accomplish. When you have a strategy, though, that strategy allows you to filter out the noise, to filter out the distractions, to be able to understand what is it that you want to say yes to and what is it that you need to say no to. And trust me, when you have a good winning strategy, there's a lot of things that you're going to say no to.
I think though these are perfect tip-offs to a great game that's going to be unfolding in the next 50 some minutes, because there's a strategy to having a strategy, right? And what I see about a strategy is most people, they hop from strategy to strategy. And to Karl's point, if it's just you, it's going to be too personal. It's going to be too emotional. It's going to be negatively affected by legacy and experience. But when you open yourself to the collective universe of LinkedIn and what is the collateral benefit to it, what I found is an evolving strategy that's based on why you started in the first place. But knowing where you started isn't where you want to finish, or can you finish at the start? You need to finish at the finish. And with that said, what I found my strategy to be, and I think it relates to what Kon just said, is you can only embrace so much, and then it becomes overwhelming. Go shopping. When do you stop shopping? When you run out of money? When they close the store down that day? Or when you go out and get what you absolutely need in a cost and time efficient manner and feel you completed the task? So what I've seen is going from macro to micro, but taking it from macro to micro is, to me, LinkedIn at its best form is strategic networking, right? Find aligned people who are where you are, but even more importantly, well along the way, if possible, to where you want to go. Find a reason to endear yourself to them that you bring enough value to justify their time and interest in you, and work with 6, 7, 8 people tops. No different than if you had 6 or 7 or 8 clients. You would be more than full up. And anything beyond that might be pushing your time and thought on to 6 or 7 or 8. But the differential here is you're not just dealing with people, you're dealing with people with networks.
Right.
You're dealing with people with centers of influence. So 7, 8 people that reach 15, 25, 50,000 people collectively, and then coming together on a show like that, because we tripled our audience relative to either one of us having the show today. We also more than expanded interest, because one person talking for so long is one person. 3 people, there's always going to be a favorite, right? There's always going to be some, I just love Kon or Karl when he's on, or me. And I think that helps. But once you get what you want, now you just have to work your strategy.
Yeah.
Right? Too many people, everybody sees that shining object. With that said, let me bring the audience into play. Omar's here. Omar was first to hit the button, so he gets the door prize today. That's yet to be determined. Good morning, guys. Nice to have met Kon the other day. What a nice group. And I think anybody describes us as nice is a friend and a valued supporter. Carrie's here. Carrie's starts with a joke. I turned my lawn clippings into a joke, but it just ended up being mulch of the same old grass. Good one. Kelly's here. Can't ever tell you enough about Kelly. We've done at least 150 shows. Kelly has The Awesome Journey on Tuesday at 1:11 p.m. with Christy Howard. Great show. And Kelly will be on this Thursday, as she is every Thursday for the last year and a half. Thank you, Kelly. And with that said, it's nice to have strategies that involve friendships, that you become a connection. And that's why I kind of thought of it last night. You start with a connection, it moves to a conversation, hopefully, which then moves to a collaboration of some sorts. And it may just be a small facet of what you're doing that person brings, but that's all you need to fill that facet. So, Karl, it seems like there's more to it than most people see, or maybe there's less to it than most people shouldn't have to see. How do you find balance when you're talking strategy?
Well, it's interesting because to me, the word strategy assumes that you have two choices, path A or B. And quite often I have people come to me who say, I don't even see the path. I don't have any choices. And as you were mentioning, sometimes you need a strategy to develop a strategy. And so out of the gate, sometimes I have to work with my clients to try to identify different funding sources that have different reasons, different reasons to come to the table on why they might provide that funding. And after we go through an exercise where we try to find who's most motivated, which is where the motivated money comes from, we may find we have too many choices. So now we're back to the issue that Kon's talking about. You can't go to all of them. You've got to pick one or two. A good strategy will allow you to move forward with one of these, but if that turns out not to work so well, you have an automatic fallback or plan B, plan C, plan D that says I can move to a different person I'm working with without having to start over from scratch. So there's both a strategy to plan the strategy, and then there's a strategy to implement the strategy that needs to be developed.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And I know Kon has, written a book about employee engagement. And I know that Karl's been focused on his newsletters. So, really being prodigious in their ability to share their information in different formats. I love the live stream because you get to actually be part of a conversation in a conversational way where you don't have 3 minutes, get it out, get it digested, and something comes out of it. And it's an overtime element because all strategies become an overtime element. You launch a strategy, it's going to take time to develop. It's going to take time to have positive impact. And I think patience and tolerance and confidence in not only your ability to form a quality strategy, but evolve a quality strategy. I know Karl had a very interesting story earlier, and sometimes that missing link doesn't show resistance, but shows support right off the bat, where you don't have to turn people around. You don't have to change their minds. In most cases, they're waiting for you. They're wondering how come you took so long to get to them. So I think there's all these dynamics. Mirjana's here from Belgrade. I know Mirjana very well. I've had conversations with her, and actually my ancestors came from that same area in Serbia. So welcome, Mirjana. Kelly agrees with us, relationships building for the win. And Kelly is such a positive influence on so many people. And, you want to be with people that always tend to see the brighter side, always try to find value in everybody. And when you're not too prejudicial or discriminating before you have a chance to get to know somebody, you have more opportunities. Too many people discount too early because they're used to being under the gun. Just like if you had 100 apps for one job, you're going to start looking at punctuation marks as a reason to disqualify somebody or the type of paper they used. So thank you so much, Kelly. Getting back to, the strategy aspect of it, some people love it and some people just are adverse to it. Like they don't like to figure things out because then they're never wrong, right? They can always be Monday quarterbacks. Today, I guess with Monday Night Football, it's Tuesday quarterbacks. So, Karl, you've been in the game for quite a bit as far as seeing people's strategies, helping people develop their strategies. What is key to streamlining the process?
Well, quite often you have to get down to why anybody's doing what they're doing, getting down to their motivation. And what I've found in working with small businesses is entrepreneurs sometimes have a conflict between their own motivation and what's best for the business. You'll see somebody who says, well, I'd like to make my fortune, and yet the business doesn't have the potential to yield that fortune for one reason or another. The market may not be ready, the product or service may not be up to par. So you have to reconcile this. And then once the entrepreneur has reconciled themselves with the goals and where they're going with the business, every other person who's part of that team, they also have to get everything aligned so that you're working together, you're working for strength, and you're bringing all these resources together to achieve that common goal. Without that, you have a tendency for every time something turns up to wander off the path and somebody to pull you away from the goal or slow you down while you're trying to realign yourself with everybody. So from a strategic standpoint, I think it's good to define that ultimate goal, what represents success, to put it in terms that can be very easily measured in terms of quality and quantity. And then assure yourself that every member of your team agrees with this being the goal and that they are going to give it the preference to get to that goal aside from any variance there may be between themselves and their personal goals and what's going on. If you can't get to that alignment, then this is not the right team, and this is going to blow up somewhere down the road. And so doing this from the very outset, understanding where you're going and being in agreement is to me the first step.
Makes so much sense. I know, Kon, you work with a lot of management groups, do a lot of workshops, and in those situations, you have to be spot on to be as relevant as you can and bring as much value as you can in sometimes a short period of time with many people involved. So what is the key to that, Kon?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've been listening to both of you speak and I've been taking some notes. So it's important to understand the work that I do. I work with large corporations. You know, they all talk about strategy. They all realize that if they're going to be successful, they have a strategy. The expectation is that senior leadership or that one person at the top is the one that starts that process by creating and crafting a vision for where they want to take the organization, where they want to take the business. It's then up to the senior leadership, the broader team, and key members of the organization to be able to contribute to the strategy about how we get there. So we start with that one focus point. We want to get to that. That's going to be our North Star. And then the question is, how do we get from where we are today to where we want to be in the time frame that we have? And that's how we start creating those strategies. We start saying, okay, if we're going to accomplish this, these are the things that need to happen. Now, as Karl knows, when he's looking at evaluating businesses and he's looking at a lot of that stuff, the strength of your leadership team, your board of directors, the senior organization, the C-suite, some of the senior operational people, with all of that, they will contribute in their way to offer their perspective. So we have a well-rounded approach that we understand that here are the 3, 4, 5 things that are going to get us the strategies, the approaches, the priorities that we have to set. We could be doing a lot of different things, but we have to narrow it down and focus on certain things that we have to get done right in order to achieve that strategy. And that's part of where we start breaking things down from this big vision, this big ultimately thing. You start breaking it down into channels of work. strategies that you hope will get them there. Now, some of them may relate to your customers. Here's how we're going to do this. This is what we're going to offer to our customers as an extra value, or we need to diversify our customers, or we need to win this market share of our customers. You can do that from the perspective of how are you going to engage your resources, your shareholders, your stakeholders, the people that are investing in your company. What do they want out of this? How are we going to benefit and provide a strategy that utilizes them? And ultimately, you look at it with the people. I mean, a big part of what I do, Don, is helping companies ultimately take that business strategy that they have and make sure that they have a people strategy, a people plan that will support that, because all of the departments, all of the functions within the company need to be able to create their own version of that strategy that's going to lift up the entire organization. It's like a cascading effect. Every one of us has a part to play into this bigger strategy. And if we all do our part, then the strategy will be successful. But if we can't align ourselves, as Karl was saying, without that alignment, we will never be able to succeed. Why? Because think about it this way visually. If you have a bunch of horses, you can either line them up and they can draw your carriage to where you want to go and you can guide them that way. Or if you just let them loose and just tether them to you and they start pulling in all sorts of directions, you're going to get quartered. You're going to get torn apart. That's no way to approach this. That's why you see businesses self-destruct a lot of times, because they're putting too much out there in all sorts of directions without any focus. We have to make sure that we align our resources, whether they are people resources, whether they're financial resources, whether they are stakeholders, allies, whatever it is. If we align those in the direction that we want to go and everybody's pulling in that direction, then we will be successful. Then that's a force that's moving in the right way.
Well, I think that really puts it in the right perspective. And, getting back to what we had talked about a little bit earlier, you can go it alone, and that is easy.
Yeah.
And what you get from that is you get complete buy-in, right? You're not soliciting a consensus at that point. You have complete responsibility and accountability, but you're extremely limited. I believe what Kon said makes so much sense relative to that you need to transfer or at least support the strategy process by getting buy-in during the process. In other words, who's in agreement already with this, right? Let's have a show of hands. Who wants to take responsibility for a part or all of it? Who wants to be accountable? Because once you leave, unless that has taken strong root, it has a chance of not really being executed properly or getting flavored in a way that may not be as efficient as the original way. Mm-hmm. So, you're right. If with the horse example, if everybody's all over the place, how do they come together? And usually everything is sweeter the first time you taste it or the first time you hear it. And after that, there's work involved, right? Anybody shows you a vision, you say, my goodness, that's just an unbelievable. Well, now it's your turn to make it happen, mm-hmm. right? It's not a done deal. Strategy is the beginning of a done deal. And I think when people really have to have the commitment and desire to change, which is essential to strategy. Mm-hmm. Why are you doing this? Well, we're so successful and we just thought we'd do something different. Versus, hey, we know what we're doing isn't working. We know it's not sustainable. And if it's not now, it has to be soon. Well, now you've got a more committed audience to it. And that makes your job easier because your job is helping them with their job, right? Because at the end of the day, it's their company. It's their upside primarily. And you want to be there to say, hey, we did this. And now from here, we can build on it. And like I've always said, you're better off doing more with less than less with more. So the more committed people, the more proven people, and coming back for the second bite of the apple is easier than the first bite. But let's go back to comments. I looked it up. This is Jason Gerardo, who will be on this Wednesday. with Dave Snell. Good morning to all. Wishing everyone a wonderful week. Absolutely. Dennis comes back. I'm happy to be here to hear your knowledge on the strategy that you're willing to share. For sure. Agree. A common goal is so much better than a lonely toll. Well said. I'll have to use that one day. Con, you're still a pro in the know. Well, thank you. Mirjana has as is with an arrow to be goal through steps. And is it human part the hardest part? And Dennis comes back with agree business tend to fail when left alone. Teamwork still works. And just to give you an example, Mirjana is a product manager out in Serbia and a really good supporter of the show. So Karl, now that we've kind of unfolded quite a bit, what's the nuances to strategy? And I know strategy also, if it's not a direct family member to strategic, they both play a significant role. What is your thoughts?
Well, there's a couple things that I want to follow up with from both your comments and from Kon's, and to point out that as your business grows, it's going to become more complex, and it isn't doing just one thing, it's doing several things all at the same time. And this is part of the reason for having a team of people who bring the skills together to do all these different tasks, these different things, but each of these individual activities are in a way competing with each other for the resources and the time of the company. And so part of the strategy that you're building is to try to get these to balance and work in common towards this goal that has been set. And that can be very difficult because you're looking forward in time, you're doing projections and forecasting, trying to understand where you're trying to go. And you're looking at the different options on balancing each of these tasks all at the same time to move forward. Part of the benefit of having a team, as Kon's described it, is that your team can be like a self-test in that you can lay out a strategy and say, we think this is the best strategy to get to the goal, and lay it on the table and let each of your team members comment and kind of vote it up or down or assign a probability of success to it. And by doing this, you can look at all the different options, A, B, C, D, or through double Z, and say, we have several options here to get us to our goal. We think these are almost certain, these are high probability, these are less likely. But your team is the judges who are voting on your strategy and working together to build the strategy and pick the one they think will best serve achieving that goal with the available resources that are before the company. So the complexity is sometimes mind-boggling where you go, and I've got 20 different things I'm trying to work all together. But to the point about Mirjana saying that, is human the hardest part? It is, because you have the team that has to work together, but the company doesn't exist by itself. You have to bring in the human element of your customers, your suppliers, your vendors, everybody in the community you're working with. Business has an impact that spills over in multiple ways, in multiple directions. And all these people will, one way or another, have some ability to influence the success of your company. So once you have a strategy or think you have a strategy, it may bear testing by talking to all the different people who you're going to impact by implementation of the strategy to see how they feel. Are they going to welcome this? Are they going to be in alignment with what you're trying to do? Or are they going to do nothing, which is its own form of resistance, or will they openly oppose you in trying to achieve your goal? So this is the reason why running a business is so much fun, because you have all these different things you have to work with. But building a strategy gives you the way to thread the needle, so to speak, to move in that direction, which in combination, everybody agrees is the right way to go.
Well, I think that has so many quality points. And moving it back to Kon, we're talking strategy, but we also know there's subsets of strategy, right? You might have a marketing strategy, you might have a communication strategy, an organizational strategy, or you might have an overarching strategy that encompasses everything. So there's timing, positioning, packaging, presentation, so many elements like Karl alluded to that make it very creative, make it very interesting if you can put the right strategy together. What's your thoughts, Con?
That's exactly it. I mean, it is all about alignment. It is all about making sure that these things are all pointing in the same direction. You know, it reminds me of an African proverb that I think we've used here before. Um, it says, "Where if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." And that's a big part of what companies are. You build a company, you build a team because you want to go far and you want to go together. But in order to go together, you have to have some commonly accepted um, points of reference that help the decision making, because we're each going to approach it from our own area of expertise, whether that's human resources, operations, marketing, sales, whoever is involved. They need to contribute their strategy to the overall strategy. But without a common point, it's impossible to line those things up. You're just shooting in the dark. So the points that we have, I mean, strategy is only one of them. So strategy will allow us to really determine what we're going to go after at the high level. The other elements of that, the important elements, are first and foremost your mission. What is it that you're doing and why you're doing it? The mission statement, the mission that you have as a team, as an organization, really helps you define why you're doing what you're doing. And then ultimately, your values as an organization, as a team, are going to tell you how you're going to accomplish that. What are the rules of engagement? If we're going to do this, we're going to execute that. We're going to do this part, the strategy. We're doing it for this reason. Well, it has to be done in a certain way. If we believe in respect and integrity, it has to be done in a respectful way. That's an honest way of doing it, an authentic way for us to be able to do that. So all of these things happen together. They need to line up. And to Mirjana's point, the vision is that ultimate point we're trying to get to. The vision is that point in the distance that we're trying to accomplish. If we're all headed in that right direction, doesn't matter which place, which point we're coming from, we're all headed in the right way. We're going to get there. So vision, the point in the future; mission, the reason why we're doing that; the strategy, what is it that's going to get us there; and values, how are we going to engage as we're getting there. All of those things need to be in alignment, again, coming together to support the strategy that we're trying to do. Otherwise, again, what are we trying to do? We're just running around. We're just staying busy. We're just being reactive to the day. You can allow the day to dictate where you're going to go, or you're going to make it happen because you have a strategy, you have an approach of how you want to get there.
Yeah, I think that really brings a lot of elements and factors into view. Because some people just say a strategy is a destination, right? We want to get to Chicago by Thursday. Well, that's great, but who's got the car? Who's going to be doing the driving? Who's going to be paying for the gas? Who's going to take a side trip to see something interesting? And all these factors. I think the other thing we need to really take into consideration is strategy is not a term that's based on being in a vacuum. So what is the strategy today? It's, in the beginning, you have to learn what is and what the interest is. You may think a business's only goal is profitability. Well, to someone who doesn't care about profitability, maybe find them in a situation where they're more cause-based, they're doing things for different reasons, is important for you to understand, because then you have to factor it in. And it's easy for you to say, how's it working, right? What was last year's strategy? What was your goal? What did you do to achieve it or not achieve it? What did you learn from it? And where do we build from it? Because change is hard for everybody. And significant change is really hard, because you have pride of authorship. You have people that have pride, maybe a little bit stubborn, that want to go the extra mile when the race is already finished. And there's a political, diplomatic way of doing things, right? Because who's the decision maker here? Who's the final word? And who do people look up to make their decisions? And I think it's awareness, it's being perceptive, it's being sensitive, and also being encouraging, right? Because there's a lot of people come in as authorities or even kind of poo-poo what someone's done, right? And that's not a good thing to disencourage people. So, it's fun. Strategy can be very much fun if it's done in a consistent way. And when it comes down to it, people could see it right off the bat. And I agree with the vision thing. Something far away is easy to appreciate. Making a root canal appointment 6 months from now isn't as much as when you're the night before and you got to go to it and deal with what comes from it. Dennis comes back with, and you're correct. Often you think your first kiss is the best, but reality is more important to learn and earn. And I think that's why having someone who has experience creating strategies, supporting strategies is so important. Do you get in situations to change a goal after some analysis? I think today in the dynamic world we live in, especially with technology, it's changing even whether you choose to. It's how do you stay in alignment? They say a rocket ship, is off course 98% of the time until the gyroscope brings it back into its mode, right? So there is typically not a clear straight line, right? Even when you're climbing a mountain, you just don't go up, you go to the right, you have a base camp, you work from it, depending on weather, depending on the team. Mirjana brings up vision, which we just talked about. And Dennis says, agree, the correct direction avoids correction. And I'll say one thing for Dennis, being in the same business for 49 years has required a winning strategy just to last this long. And I guarantee you 49 years ago, if you took a picture of the business, doesn't even come close to resembling the business today. So there had to be adjustments in strategy, allowances, and you also have to keep the team together. It's not set and forget it, because you're going to have people leave. You're going to have people who are not always buying into it. So it's like a shock absorber. How do you have those elements that don't disrupt it too much? And I guess having metrics, having something to track, right? If you're going to Chicago in 3 days and you didn't do nothing but go to lunch today, you better start driving real fast and very long to get there. And if you don't, then, they say a goal without a destination or a result is just a wish that will probably never come true, and I think that's important. So, Karl, very fascinating conversation, starting with a simple word like strategy.
I think that this, we're working we go through a progression. We start with a vision, we start with a mission. We get to a point where we're doing strategy. And one of the things that I see businesses commonly fail at is they say, well, I have a strategy. And I go, what's the end date, or what's the projected date of achieving the success? And quite often it's a very short period of time. It's a short-term strategy. It's not a long-term strategy. And then, we have to step back, and particularly with funding, I'm going, so if you give up half of your company in the first round of funding, how much of your company do you have left for the second and third round of funding? And they're like, oh, I go, yeah, I know we're going to try to increase value, so you have to give up less for the same amount of money. But we don't want to get to a point where we gave away 110% of the business and there's nothing left for you. So the strategy has to be far enough out in time where you pick an end goal that truly does represent success. Everything in between, I call a milestone, which is a step in the right direction, but it's not the end story. It's not the end place. And these all have to work together so that we are going to get to that end goal. And too many times businesses like, I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to get to tomorrow. And tomorrow we then react to the day before and hopefully the day after. But this reactive manner, without a strategy, without getting to that level of detail, is going to allow you to continue to wander, to meander, to go in directions other people are pushing you rather than the direction you may want to go yourself. So another thought I'd put on the table, though, is that once you have the strategy, then you need to get into the planning. the implementation, the task, assignment, allocation, responsibility, everything that goes into making that strategy a reality. And the first time we do a plan, it's like stress testing the strategy. Does this actually strategy, is it workable? Can we do it? Will it survive, when we put it into actual practice? And sometimes we find it won't. Sometimes we find that even though the strategy sounded good, looked good, for whatever reason, it's not going to hang together. And we have to go back and revisit, revitalize, and change it. So it is kind of the question, do you sometimes have to change? Absolutely. And to your point, Don, everything's changing all the time. So the strategy may have been perfect yesterday and it may be a disaster tomorrow. So we have to keep adjusting to make sure that we work continuously towards our goal. So constant, continuous refinement is always going to be required.
Perfect. Kon?
Yeah, I'm listening in, and it's some wonderful insights. I will add some more definition around that, if I may, Karl. In the terms that I work with from a consulting standpoint, from when we talk about that, there's a lot of effort that goes into developing the right strategy for your business. It's not something you want to be doing every day. The word itself has a certain gravity and a certain sense of big, much bigger and much more far-reaching from that perspective. So when we create strategies to support our vision, our mission, the values of what we're trying to do, we do that typically with a view to 3 or 4 or 5 years out, if not longer. And then these are things that we invest in because we know we're playing the long game. Strategy is all about the long game. When we take the strategy, though, to your point, in the meantime, to hit those milestones, we need to translate strategy into tactics. The tactics are the day-to-day stuff, the month-to-month stuff, the quarter-to-quarter stuff that we can do in between to be able to know that we're on the right track. To use Don's analogy, if I'm headed to Chicago from Denver, there are certain milestones along the way that I know I need to hit if I'm going to hit them in the right timing to get there when I said I was going to get there. So I need to adjust my tactics as things change in my reality to accommodate the strategy. But the strategy should not be something that we willy-nilly change, because then it's not really a strategy. It's just a bigger tactic from that perspective. Mirjana mentioned something earlier in her question, and I love the fact that our audience is throwing questions out for us, because that helps guide a lot of our answers in the discussions. So please keep them coming. But Mirjana says, do you get in a situation to change the goal after some analysis? Well, the goal that we change in that situation is the tactical goal. There's going to be adjustment. If there's construction on the highway that I had picked originally to go down, I can't get through that, or there's a significant delay, I may have to pick a different route to get to that point. And a good strategist is going to have those 2 or 3 or 4 options in their back pocket. There's more than one way to get there. There's just an optimal way, and then there's alternatives as things change. And from that perspective, we have to constantly be shifting. As leaders, we have to be shifting between the strategy, always keeping an eye on that because that's where we're going, and the tactics that we have to take on a day-to-day basis to adjust to the changing environment. We may think that line is never straight. People think that you set a course and it's going to be straight. It's never straight. Your plans, your best laid plans, are obsolete the minute you put them in play, because reality is constantly changing. But what you have to rely on are those things: your vision, your mission, your values, and your strategic priorities. Your strategy is going to guide those bigger chunks of work, and then allow yourself to flow as you need to take advantage of the moments and the days. There's going to be ups and downs that are really going to either hinder you and you have to find an alternative, or they're going to be a tailwind to you and they're going to push you forward. You might even realize that through the analysis, you've underestimated how much you can get done, or you hit that golden mark and all of a sudden you've launched a product that's hitting the mark, that's resonating with an audience. Or you know what? You put out new Coke and nobody likes it. They all hate it.
Well, you become something that people talk about. Even the Etzel people are still talking about. So even failures get you exposure. I think another key element that comes to mind is confidence in the strategy and who's providing that support, because if you take that road trip again, I always, when it's something longer or interesting, I always put Waze in, right? So you type in, want to go to DIA, and it tells you this. And in the beginning, it would say, well, get off of I-70 and take Brighton Boulevard. And you think to yourself, I would never do something like that. They must be wrong.
Right.
The rule of thumb was they will never tell you an alternate route unless it can save you at least 5 minutes.
Right.
Right. So I'm usually with my wife when we're driving, and she would say, well, it tells us to do this. In the beginning, I said, how could that be?
I know better.
I wouldn't, but you then get off, you take this weirdo route for like 1.5 miles, and you jump back on, you see this huge traffic jam behind you. And you get to learn that they wouldn't be telling you these things to just tell you these things. So when you take it back to the company or the organization you're working with, it's really about understanding to what we talk about long-term or short-term.
Yeah.
If somebody's going to say, I want to sell my business in 6 months, you're not going to be starting hiring people to train and bring in a lot of capital improvements, because it'll just decrease cash. It won't ever come to fruition. It's like changing your carpet before you sell the house and someone doesn't like green, right? And you would have been better off giving them a carpet allowance as opposed to doing something like that. So, everybody's time is important. I think also gathering the lowest hanging fruit in the beginning to make people believers is like, hey, what can we get done in a short period of time, which is just an adjustment or deviation to what you're already doing, to make you feel comfortable, to get you some dividends out of this, to get people who take the leadership role on it. And then what is the vested interest of all the players, right? If someone wants a company to stay with for the next 20 years, figuring out a strategy to sell it is not going to appeal to everybody in the group. It might appeal to the person with the biggest equity interest or the person who wants to retire earlier. So you have to be sensitive to everybody's needs. And then someone just has to swallow it, right? I mean, at a certain point, it can't be everybody's happy, but it can be that this is the best thing we can do with what we have under the circumstances. And I think the mission statement is important if it's credible, right? Does this apply to, our ethical way of doing business? Does this apply to our reason for being? And that has to be incorporated, because people have already hopefully bought into it or respect that. And now you're fortifying it versus willy-nilly, here's a short-term winning strategy, but it leaves us kind of at the gate again. So, Karl, I know you talk with people who don't know you as well until they meet you, have certain set ways of thinking or doing. And there's a point where you say, even Superman couldn't do this for you. Right? I mean, where it's so outlandish. I want to raise $10 million and we've never made a dime in the business and don't plan to. What's the strategy? The strategy is come back with something I can put my teeth into. So, Karl?
Yeah, no, quite often a vision is impossible. As much as we like to say that anything can be done, if you can imagine it, you can make it happen. But that may be true with more resources than you can bring to bear, or more time that's required, or something that makes it impractical, or from a business standpoint, an unsustainable economic outcome, which is a nice way of saying that won't work. So at the very beginning, you have to be realistic in what your capabilities are, and understanding that whatever you're going to do is dependent upon other people working with you, particularly your customers. If they don't like your product or service, it doesn't matter how shiny it is or what number of colors that you offer it in. Or if I can only get one of those, if I have to wait 14 months for the supply chain to catch up with it. A lot of people are going to say there's got to be a plan B, and I'll go do it a different way. So we do have to be realistic. We have to, and part of the challenge is when you're doing something new, You don't know what can or cannot be done because this is the first time it's ever been attempted. And that's where, depending upon your team, upon experts who have experience doing new things, uh, have experience within an industry or a market or with the underlying technology, can all contribute to giving you a better idea of what you're trying to do is possible. And is it reasonably possible, not simply statistically maybe possible, and distinguishing between those 2 points. Early in my career, I used to think anything could be done. I proved many times that was not true. So as I get older, my goal now is to try to find the line between what's possible and what's probable, and is the probability high enough to support the risk and the resources required to get to that point.
Well, and I think that, what we're demonstrating today is how much more depth there is to creating a strategy. It's not something that's just familiar or interesting, but even the best laid plans of mice and men go astray. How many times does a studio put 130 million into a movie and it bombs? And I saw an article the other day on movies that generate 100 times their cost, right? Movies that people thought weren't going to be very interesting, wouldn't be very well accepted. And you never know what you don't know. And I guess it depends on your staging of it, your testing of it, right? You don't got to go full out. I mean, if you want to test something, you can test it in Cleveland before you take it to the rest of the country and then tweak it. That's why before shows usually go to Broadway, they're in Connecticut or somewhere else where they try things out. They try different lines. And when they feel they got it, then they hit Broadway, because it's too hard to get big and then get better. It's easier to get better and then get bigger, right? Get it nailed down, because anything with speed or size will start to challenge the foundation of it. If the foundation isn't strong, if the commitment isn't there. And I guess that's where caveats come in. If you're the one who's orchestrating, instituting, motivating people to do it, there has to be some knowledge that if this isn't done by this time, or people aren't getting behind it, here's the new result that you can expect, right? You're going to get to Chicago next week. If that's not a problem, enjoy the ride. But the other thing is again, we talked about dynamic change. If you change this, it's going to change that, right? If it's a week late in delivery, then everybody who's in sales, everybody's in distribution, everybody's in marketing has to make that adjustment, right? We're not going live until next August. Well, what do we do in the meantime? I don't know, but that's the cost of not doing it in the right time, in the right way. Kon, what's your thoughts? And this is a fun exercise, because it can be anything you choose it to be, at least in verbiage.
Yeah.
When the rubber meets the road, that's when the value starts to be demonstrated.
It's funny. I've got so many cliches running through my head right now. And let me share some of them. I mean, think about it this way. I mean, how many times have we said, if you don't have time to do it right, are you going to have time to fix it afterwards, to repair the damage? I mean, seriously, sometimes you got to test it. Like you said, test it off in a small market, in a test group, get feedback from that, and do your homework before that to see before you go out there. And then, because everybody's got a plan. Didn't that Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Then what are you going to do? And so all of these things lead us down that same path, all of these things going. I'm going to bring it back to something that you said, but as a follow-up to what Karl said before you. And you realize that part of the reason why people bring experts like us in, if I want to figure out how to maximize LinkedIn and I want to be able to build a show, I'm going to come to you, Don. I'm going to pick your brain, and I'm going to have you help me. If I want to figure out how to get the right investment in my business, to get the right partner in that process, I'm going to go to Karl. The same way people come to me if they want to develop the right business strategy, the people strategy that's going to support their business strategy and all of that, and help develop their people so they have a pipeline of talent, they have a confidence in that, they'll come to me. Because why? You can't lead people where you've never been. And we've been there. We've been there. We've done that. We have the t-shirt to prove it. And so when leaders want to go in that direction, they have a vision that they want to accomplish this, or part of their strategy is doing this, refinancing, gaining investment in money, getting funding for their business, growing their business online, or having that confidence that their people will execute their plan, they'll come to us to help them, guide them there. Even if they haven't been, smart leader knows where to go to get that answer, to go to find the resources that they need. Whether it's within their team or beyond that, they'll go and find the right answers. Because again, you cannot lead people where you've never been.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what brings to mind, and that's the beauty of these shows, is my strategy changes once I hear anybody else relate to it. Because it's like, okay, let's add that to the mix. Let's make that a topping on top of the cake. And we have done things in a informal way that has formal benefit, right? So when Karl comes to meet with somebody, or Kon or myself, there should be an understanding of who we're also influenced by and who we're related to. Right. So if I say, I don't really understand this as well as I know Karl does, I'll have a conversation with Karl, or maybe I'll bring him to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Right. And why not bring the strength to bear? Because numbers have value, right? If you've got three heads working together, or that, hey, if I get stuck, I've got resources that can help me. Again, if we talk about going fast or far, you want to be the, let's say, figurehead, or the person, the contact person, but you don't want to be the be all and end all, right?
You can't.
want to be able to say, hey, I've got a CPA who's a genius at this stuff. Let me take some time. I'll get with them. Maybe I'll introduce you, but at least let me run it by them. That's why if you have like a big law firm, you have specialists. Well, I've got a guy in bankruptcy. He's absolutely someone who needs to be part of this, because you want to get it right, and you want to make people achieve more than they could have without you, right? And if you can get that result, then you've proven yourself, and it's easier to say, okay, now that you got us to this point, can you get us to that point?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you've already earned your stripes. You built your credibility with people. And because people wouldn't be asking if they knew it for themselves, right? If you can help yourself, you're not going to get somebody out there to help you, but it's when you're hitting a wall, or most importantly, something changed in the marketplace. Your competition, who's much bigger, dropped prices 20%, right? And all of a sudden you can't be profitable and competitive. What do you do? I don't know, but that's where a strategy would come in, or testing people's strategy. So now that we're coming up top of the hour, I can't believe it got through 58 minutes. And I know that we have hours more if we were pressed to continue to be an orator today. What was your takeaway today, Karl?
Well, I think that the topic of strategy is it's a stepping stone of progression. You start with your vision, you set your mission, and then you move into strategy. And as Kon pointed out, you want it to be as stable long-term as possible. You don't want it bending back and forth with the direction of the wind of the moment. But at the same time, it has to be agile and flexible enough to adapt to changing conditions. And developing a strategy with a team that's in total alignment is probably the best thing you can do to assure yourself of the highest probability of success. Because if you have a group of people with good experience, and your experts, who I'm going to include in the broader definition of team, if they all agree this is the best path to take, the best way to get to where we want to go, then it may not happen, but the likelihood of it not happening is slim. So get the strategy fixed, do it with expertise, and that will help move you through all the challenges you will face along the path.
I think that is such a positive note. Kon, what's your takeaways today?
Now I'm just going to sit back and enjoy what Carl just said, but I'll add to that a few more sentences. Just simply, allow yourself the time and the right people around you to create a winning strategy for what you want to accomplish with your business, with your life, and then allow that strategy to become part of the decision-making progress in your day-to-day, your process in your day-to-day activities. Let that guide you along with your mission, along with your values, it's one of those important things that you need to factor in when you're saying yes or no to things along the way. Does this line up with my strategy? Does this take me where I want to go? Does this do it in a way that's consistent with what's important to me right now? If the answer is yes, then do it. If the answer is no, then don't, because you can bring those things together. The Japanese say that vision without execution and action is daydreaming. Action without vision is a nightmare. And that's the thing that we need to remember. You can replace vision with strategy in this case. So think about that, craft the right strategy for what's important to you and what you want to accomplish, and then allow that to become the channel through which you take all of your activities.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think the common thread you just brought up, Kon, is every strategy has to be people first, right? Because that's what you're dealing with, the people who you're forming the strategy with, the people who are going to execute the strategy, the end user or client who's going to benefit from the strategy. You always have to take all those different mindsets. If you're just building a better ladder, then it's all about materials and construction and all that stuff. And, then it has to go to the people side. And I believe that people who do believe in the vision, who, they say faith is the belief in the invisible, right? When you're sharing a vision, it's not very tangible. It's not something you could grab onto, but it's also something that might help you drive yourself to a higher level of achievement, because you feel the benefit is so great. The learning is so great. And I guess at the end of the day, you got to answer the why question. Why me? Why now? What's so important about this? And I also agree you're better off taking a little more time, and even if you got to put it on autopilot till you figure it out, then rush to judgment, rush to execution, and then your credibility and everything starts getting diminished when it's not working that well. And who was responsible, and instead of getting credit, who's getting the finger pointed at them? So that gets into politics and bureaucracy, which is also an important element, but too late to be able to go into it. And that's why we'll continue to have shows like this, so we can continue to dig, or we all have deep wells of knowledge and experience. And I think that's so important. And that doesn't get the consideration of matching things. And some things have never changed over time. And some things change by the second, which is relationship building is so important, and is legacy, but brings value. So a mix, a blend, everything goes towards the right goal. With that said, want to thank everybody for being here, especially Karl and Kon. Wonderful audience today. Mirjana, you were excellent in creating more and more thought-provoking ideas for us to follow. Tomorrow, just want to share that Beverly and a new lady who is just very impressive. Her name is Henrietta. Can't pronounce her last name. Just to tell you, she's a Hungarian-born, educated, went to Switzerland, got her MBA and PhD. She moved to New York. She's a neuroscientist. Just unbelievable what she's been able to accomplish, and very impressive. And this show will bring you more and more of the diamonds in the rough. The people who may not have gotten the exposure but deserve it, and hopefully we bring that to you. So with that said, go out and have a wonderful week. It's Monday. It's a full week this week. And hopefully we'll talk in 23 hours. And don't forget to see Karl's show tomorrow with Kon. It's at 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Mountain. If you liked what you saw today, you'll even like it more tomorrow because you'll just have two people splitting the pie. And
Let the fireworks commence.
yeah. So great to end on a laugh and a smile. Thank